Is Immanuel Quickley underrated? Is he overpaid? Can two things be true at the exact same time? I think they can. And I'm going to take you through a film breakdown. I'm going to take you through a statistical analysis of why I believe Immanuel Quickley is probably the most underrated player in the league. Now, Toronto Raptor fans are no secret or no strangers to having their players underrated by the American media. It's been happening since the 90s. Trace McGrady wasn't a big deal here, goes to Orlando, he's a big deal, right? Vince Carter was a big deal here, but let's just be honest. For the most part, we consistently in Toronto have felt that our players don't necessarily get their due respect from the ESPNs and the Bleacher Reports of the world. And I got to say, with Immanuel Quickley, it feels a little bit different because this is not necessarily only ESPN disrespecting Immanuel Quickley. It is Toronto Raptor fans, Toronto Raptor faithful. And I think the argument that I hear consistently is $32 million. Now, what you focus on amplifies, and it's very easy to say that a guy who played 33 games, under 1,000 minutes, didn't necessarily have some statistically dominant season in which he came out and averaged 24 points per game, or took some massive leap. That dude who played on a 30-win team probably doesn't deserve $32 million, especially when we see what other guys are getting, like Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And I think that for a lot of people, Immanuel Quickley is in the Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Cole Anthony tier of basketball players. And I think for other people, perhaps the guys who signed his contract, he might be in a very different tier. For the Toronto Raptors, a team that is deprived of ball handling, deprived of shooting, a team that was one of the worst three-point shooting teams last year, I think Immanuel Quickley might be the most important player on this team, at least offensively. Offensively, he might be the most critical player because everything the Raptors have done this offseason is putting defenders and connectors around. But all that defense and all that connection doesn't mean a hell of a lot if you can't shoot. All that rolling and short roll potential doesn't mean a hell of a lot if you have nobody who can dribble, right? Dribble the basketball. Scottie Barnes is certainly not the best ball handler. And I think nothing that he's going to do this offseason is going to fix that problem entirely. He can get better at it, but he's not going to be Immanuel Quickley. Prior to coming to the Toronto Raptors, Immanuel Quickley was a sixth man for the New York Knicks. And I think while in that role, he garnered a lot of praise for what he did. He consistently closed lineups. He was consistently on the floor in the clutch time moments. Obviously, the Knicks did not want to pay Immanuel Quickley $25+ million. So the Raptors said, hey, we'll do it. And then the Raptors out leveraged or outbid against themselves and ended up signing him to $32 million and considered him the second most important player after Scottie Barnes in their quote unquote, the future is now branding last season. And I'll understand that a lot of people, myself included, felt this contract's a little bit rich. But in the process of dissecting what $32.5 million means, what a flat contract means, et cetera, in the process of maybe dissecting some of his flaws, have we completely lost sight of every amazing thing that Immanuel Quickley does? Because for all the people who say that he's more Cole Anthony than Spider Mitchell, I'd actually argue he's a little bit closer to Donovan Mitchell than he is to Cole Anthony. And that sounds a little bit crazy. But the truth is, for all the praise that Immanuel Quickley got in New York for the amazing job he did as a sixth man, and he was in consistent contention as sixth man of the year, I would argue he's a much better player today. And I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to prove it to you through the stats. I'm going to prove it to you through the film. And I'm going to tell you why I think Immanuel Quickley is a top 50 to top 60 player in the NBA, and why at the age of 25, going on 26, he is probably close to fairly paid. It's $32 million is closer to his fair value than $20 million is. And I feel like most Raptor fans don't agree with that. So let's talk about Immanuel Quickley, and let's get to this. Now, this is how Crafted sees Immanuel Quickley. Obviously, the efficiency is nothing to write home about, but that 97th percentile shot quality certainly is something to write home about, ain't it? Ain't it? 97th percentile shot quality, how does he do it? Well, simply put, Immanuel Quickley does some amazing things on the basketball court that are supposed to be very valuable according to the analytics. Now, if the analytics are wrong, sure, but they're not wrong. Deep shooting and spacing means a lot. A guy who takes a lot of layups at the rim and a guy who takes a lot of threes and pretty much doesn't take a lot of mid-range shots and is relatively efficient at them. Shot quality is merely a measure of how efficient you are at the shots that you take, or do you consistently take the shots that you are supposed to take. This is a measure not only of shooting talent and scoring talent, but also basketball IQ and discipline. And Immanuel Quickley is amazing at this. In terms of free throw rate, 74th percentile. He is pretty good at this and he is getting better and better. And if something that I heard this offseason, just from talking to someone who's a little bit close to Quickly, is that he has gotten a lot stronger. That this was a major focus of his, that he wanted to come back as a better defender. And I think if that actually holds up, if he can take that jump as a more physical guard, if he can take a few more bumps, because we all know Immanuel Quickley has been sort of slight of frame, then all of that size and length, that 6'9" wingspan of his, combined with the refinement of his passing and all that stuff that he's been working on, that really shines through in this chart here. I mean, look at it. 97th percentile creation. What are we talking about? These are Cade Cunningham numbers. 92nd percentile portability tells you that he can fit in with just about any lineup. For all we say, and again, this channel has a little bit of a Scottie bias, which is to say we consistently look at the moves that the Raptors make in terms of how it benefits or does not benefit Scottie Barnes. Colin Murray Boyles, that's a problem because, he can't really shoot. And Elijah Martin, kind of a problem because he can't really shoot either. And all of these guys somewhat present a problem if you view it from the prism of how does it help Scottie. But whether you're talking about Brandon Ingram, whether you're talking about Colin Murray Boyles, whether you're talking about really anything the Raptors have done over the last 2 years, one person who consistently benefits from every move they make is Immanuel Quickley. Immanuel Quickley consistently continues to benefit. Jacoby Walter helps Immanuel Quickley. Immanuel Quickley is a good team defender, may not necessarily be the most prolific point of attack defender. And so it helps to have somebody who can take that load off of him. Colin Murray Boyles is a great screen and roll guy. He is great as a connective passer, short roll passer. Well, that also helps Immanuel Quickley. He's also a great team defender, which can also, in conjunction with Quickley, help him. But considering 95th percentile load, incredible, right? 89th percentile passer rating, probably one of the weaker parts of his game is that he's not the most dynamic passer, but he has gotten a lot better with this, and I'll show you through the stats. In terms of the defense, obviously, he could be a lot better. He dies on screens. He's not the most physical. He's not the most switchable. Versatility is a problem. He's not necessarily super strong in the post. So these are all problems, and I think strength can fix a lot of them. But if I show you the analytics for some of the other lead guards in the league, whether we're talking De'Aaron Fox, who is widely considered a good defender, talking about Donovan Mitchell, well, I'm not even talking about the defensive sieves, guys like Trae Young and Darius Garland. I would argue that Immanuel Quickley is above average. Above average. And if you put him with really good defenders around him, like if he had consistent minutes with OG, Pascal, Scottie, that lineup, he probably could have done a really good job with that group. Unfortunately, he got traded for OG. And let's not forget, Sam Vecini, the day that trade went down, said on record. Now, some of you may have a contentious relationship with Sam Vecini because he also called Scottie Barnes a serial level scorer, but he is a widely well-respected basketball analyst. And he said the best player in this deal is not OG and it's not RJ. Those are the two most talked about guys. The best player in this deal is Quickley. And while I didn't completely agree with it at the point, I could see the argument. I could certainly see the argument. And it's actually one of the biggest reasons why I wasn't super opposed to trading one of my favorite players on the team, because I really had that type of faith in Quickley. And while that faith is not lost, it has to be somewhat restored right now. Let's continue on. In terms of just how he scores, right? Look at the offensive comparables according to Crafted, right? These are the players that most mimic Immanuel Quickley. Now, these are not the names that he is often compared to, but these are the 10 names that Crafted most compares to Immanuel Quickley offensively. They're all star-type players. Starting at the bottom, Tyler Hero, Luka Doncic, Jason Tatum, Tyrese Maxey, his former teammate at Kentucky, Jamal Murray, Jalen Williams, Austin Reeves, Tyrese Halliburton, Damian Lillard, and Donovan Mitchell. Is the model completely broken? Are our eyes not adjusting to Immanuel Quickley's rapid ascension in this regard? In terms of defense, nothing to write home about, right? These are all poor defenders to medium defenders. These are nobody's definition of a great defender. The closest thing to a good defender there is Christian Brown. Going on to overall impact, Austin Reeves, Donovan Mitchell, Damian Lillard, Tyrese Maxey, Kobe White, Darius Garland. I think this is fair. I think it's fair. Those are bigger names. Those are bigger names and bigger markets. Maybe they won a lot more, but Kobe White is fair. But because Kobe White had those extreme breakout games, right? Kobe White was not on a developmental team. Kobe White was not being asked by his head coach to consistently go against play type. Immanuel Quickley was, just as much as Scottie Barnes was, suboptimally used this season. Make no mistake about it. Immanuel Quickley, they didn't go out and be like, yo, Immanuel Quickley, build up your trade value. They didn't do that. If they wanted to do that, they could have used him very differently. They didn't do that. They said, Immanuel Quickley, this is what we don't think you're good at. Let's figure out how to become better at it. Now, it's not lost on me, by the way, that a certain player, it was just announced that Devin Booker is going to be playing point guard for the Phoenix Suns permanently this year. He's going to be the starting point guard. Now, most people don't think about Devin Booker as a point guard, but I'll tell you one person who saw point guard in Devin Booker, and that was Darko Rajakovic way back when he coached him. Another player who's going to be playing a lot of point guard this season is Desmond Bane. And that's another player that nobody really thought of as a point guard coming out of college, but guess who saw him as a bit of a point guard? That's Darko Rajakovic. And I think the same thing is happening with Quickley and RJ, which is their point guard skills have developed rapidly under Darko, and I don't think people are appreciating it enough. There were times last season where I genuinely felt that RJ Barrett might be the Raptors' best bet at point guard, not defensively, but certain situations offensively, especially when Scottie was out, I almost preferred him to Jamal Shed or anybody else that they might have had in that situation because he was so good at it. And I think Immanuel Quickley, while not jaw-dropping or eye-catching in any regard in this matter, has actually quietly developed quite a bit of point guard reps under Darko Rajakovic. Let me just continue here. So continuing on with this one, in terms of usage and play type, you will see that Immanuel Quickley was used primarily as a pick and roll ball handler last year. That's not how he was used in New York, apart from the second season. Immanuel Quickley is an off-ball shooting guard / point guard. He is a combo guard. Now, the fact that his point guard skills have developed as rapidly and as much as they have under Darko over the last 2 years is going to be a blessing because now he is portable. He doesn't have to be used only one way. And I don't think ever becoming a better playmaker is never going to hurt you as a basketball player. It's always going to help. But I think if you want to talk about how would a contender best use Immanuel Quickley, it's probably as an off-ball spacing threat. And when he has the basketball, there's nobody who can provide the space for him that he can provide for others. So in a lot of ways, putting the basketball in his hands is the worst idea possible. It's not a knock on him. It's a knock on the roster around him. Scottie Barnes and RJ Barrett do not command respect away from the basketball. They command respect when they're cutting right to the front of the rim. Scottie Barnes may command respect on the block, mid-range, when he catches the ball, but not when he doesn't have the ball, unless it's a deep seal, like 2 feet away from the paint. So when Immanuel Quickley does have the ball, the roster around him does not reflect positive spacing. When he doesn't have the ball, however, and when he's running off all those screens and coming off of curls, that's when the Raptors offense can really function. And I think we saw bits and pieces of that last season, but that wasn't necessarily the Raptors' modus operandi. That's not what they were going for. They were not trying to optimize their offense. They were trying to optimize their players. And I don't think that those are the same things. But now that you have Brandon Ingram and Scottie Barnes and RJ Barrett, and you have all these scores, now I think Immanuel Quickley can go back to what he's really great at. And what he's really great at is the handoffs, the spot ups, the off-screen stuff, things that represent very little of his actual shot diet this season, which I think is important. But he had a very respectable season by any metric imaginable, and he wasn't even being used optimally. Let me make myself small here so you can see these numbers. Oops, that's not going to be possible. Okay, here we go. I want you to take a look at who he's been per 100 possessions and go through just what he's done well and what he hasn't. I want you to kind of disregard his rookie season for the most part, but I want you to really hone in on basically one number that really consistently matters to me a lot is usage, right? His usage has never been high. He's not a super high usage guy. He doesn't dribble, 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 pound, pound, right? And more importantly, I think he is a player who serves very well as a third, fourth option. I think when you put him as your first option, you get into trouble. I understand the criticism that you shouldn't be paying a third, fourth option, $32 million, but that doesn't really matter. It's neither here nor there. I mean, the OKC Thunder paid Isaiah Hardenstein to come off the bench occasionally $27 million. That doesn't matter. What matters to me is how it all fits. And I want you to look at a few numbers that really matter to me. Number one is look at that box plus minus. Look at that offensive box plus minus. Look at where it went. Look at where it's come from and look at where it's going. A positive 3.2 box plus minus, offensive box plus minus is considerably better than I believe any mark that Pascal Siakam has posted in his career or is close to. Like that's the tier we're talking about. I don't think Fred VanVleet was ever really in these tiers. This is some star level shit. This is not superstar, but this is well above all-star level offensive box plus minus. So his impact offensively has been solid. Okay. I also want you to look at that three-point attempt rate because it is insanely high. Now, the number that I want you to really hone in on is that second year in the season that I want you to hone in on is that second year in New York. Now, you'll notice something very interesting happened in that second year in New York, which is that assist percentage jumps from 16 to 24. Now, what happens is his entire analytical profile goes down. Why? Because that wasn't necessarily his skill set. And New York pretty much abandoned that right away. And then they pushed him right back into his previous role the very next year. So 2022, 2023, Jalen Brunson minutes, 2023, 2024, right before the trade, more Jalen Brunson minutes. So it's Brunson having the ball in his hands, creating a lot more, and Immanuel Quickley doing more off-ball stuff. And in that role, he thrived. So it kind of begs the question, if you're a Toronto Raptor fan who was finding out that the Raptors have traded for Immanuel Quickley, is, well, what are we really getting? Are we getting a supercharged six-man who can play off the ball? Or are we getting a real point guard? Are we getting like a true lead guard? And I think over the last 2 years, the Raptors have pushed him into that direction of true lead guard. They've given him the responsibilities of a lead guard offensively and defensively. They've given him lead guard responsibilities off the court. And I think he's really thriving in this role. And the fact that he had a plus 3.2 offensive box plus minus in a situation in which he was given such a huge creation load tells you just how much he's improved across the board in these situations. And I think the film is not going to lie to you in that situation. Now, the other thing that I will say is look at his shot chart. It is truly a tale of halves, literally split the court in half. Now, small sample size. He played under 1,000 minutes last year, so this is not gospel by any means. It's not like, oh my God, Immanuel Quickley cannot shoot from that side of the court. But it does so happen to be ironic that almost all of his strengths come on one side of the court, where he is basically like 45% above the break. 45% three-point shooter above the break is a heart attack. That's like Steph Curry numbers. So when you consider the ability to hit deep, deep range threes, like from 30 feet away, he can pull. And I think maybe this point, I should have mentioned this earlier. Immanuel Quickley shoots a flat shot. We've talked about it many times. Immanuel Quickley is not Steph Curry. Immanuel Quickley is not Klay Thompson. He's not Ray Allen. He's not that quite that level of shooter. But I think the thing, and he's not Trae Young in that sense either. And I think the thing that holds him back from those players is that his release is a little bit flat and a little bit slow. And all of these things, these are problems. More of them are going to be problems when you're on the ball. Because when you're on the ball, you already have attention. When you're off the ball, you might get a little bit more of a pocket of space. And in the film session, we'll show you how he creates on the ball, off the ball, and how he's improved as a passer. But I think that it's very important to realize that this is the type of player who can create the type of space that Scottie and BI so desperately need. And in terms of the Raptors' success this season, I think it comes down to three critical things. Number one, Scottie Barnes takes that all NBA jump. Step two is Brandon Ingram actually buys in and is healthy. Like, I know it's a kind of a two-parter, but he has to buy in and be healthy. And what I mean by buy in is he's got to be able to positively space the court. He's got to be positively able to connect with his teammates and participate in the stuff that the Raptors do offensively to keep the whole thing moving. He can't become ball dominant and start sucking up possessions where he dribble, isos the hell out of the basketball. But at the same time, I think the third thing that is most important for the Raptors is that Immanuel Quickley play basketball games this year. And I'm not saying like he needs to take some monumental jump or, oh my God, he's got to come back 15 pounds heavier and stronger, whatever. That will help. But even last year's version of Immanuel Quickley helps this team so much. Let's take a look at a little bit of what Immanuel Quickley does. So we start with on ball. Okay, let's start with on the basketball. And this is against the Cleveland Cavaliers. I believe this was the first game of the season. Now, again, this is a big, and this is a cross match. And this is not a cross match that even a really good big like Jared Allen is going to succeed in well. And late contest, Immanuel Quickley has a bit of a flat release, a little bit of a front-facing release, but it's fast enough to beat with that much space. And you'll notice that his on-ball opportunities either require a screen assist or a considerable amount of space from the defender sagging off. Now, when defenders press up on him, his ball handling is just good enough, and now he's getting strong enough that he can blow past them. He has counters to counters now, and this is not something that he had in New York. Now, here, Scottie sets a screen, defender goes under, big mistake. Once again, same game, Cleveland. Okay, now in transition, where I think Immanuel Quickley can be an absolute cheat code popping up above the break, look at how deep this three is. Who's stopping this? And you should want to stop this because he's relatively efficient here. He's 45%. Here we go. More on the ball stuff. And this is where we say the additional strength is going to help him. It's going to help Jacoby. It's going to help Grady. Those three players needed to get stronger in a major way. And I think they all have for the most part. Look at that. Finishing through contact here. This is against a really good defender in Andrew Nembhard. Now here, again, like this array of counters and stuff, this is his whole game. Okay. Immanuel Quickley played in a shoebox with Toronto the last few years. He's been encouraged to go away from his strengths and lean into his weaknesses. Now, we had a really fascinating conversation on the panel today about Bob Cousy and how players in the 60s had to play sort of in a box. You're a great shooter, there's no three-point line. You're a great ball handler. Well, you can't put the ball, you can't put the ball underneath your hand. You can't put the ball on the side of your hand. You got to dribble like a crazy person. So if you're a good ball handler, this is going to limit you, right? Can't dunk the basketball. There's so many advantages that were taken away from players at that time. And I think in a lot of ways, the Raptors did something similar to Immanuel Quickley because Immanuel Quickley is a floater demon. We all knew this. Watching him in New York, this is a guy who's pretty automatic from 10, 12 feet with that floater, and that was his game. And instead, the Raptors petitioned him to finish at the basket. And kudos to him. He trusted them, knowing that this was a weakness in his game, knowing that he needed to get further in. But that doesn't take away from all the other stuff he can do, right? I mean, this is a player that is fundamentally when you bring a guy in, well, I want you to imagine that in the year 2001, right? The Toronto Raptors have traded for Shaquille O'Neal, right? I want you to imagine that they traded for Shaq. Now, y'all know what Shaq does. Shaq is defending the rim. He's a big-time rebounder. He's big-time post presence. He's a good post hub big. I want you to imagine that instead of using him, we had Darko Rajakovic back there who was just like, Shaquille O'Neal, come here. I have a little bit of an issue with your jump shooting and your form and your free throw shooting. And basically, I'm going to use you as an elbow big who takes a lot of turnaround jump shots. Yeah, it might help Shaq refine his overall game, and it might help him like round himself out. Oh yeah, I know you're a great perimeter. I know you're a great post big, but we're gonna have you switching out on these screens and guarding higher up in the defense. Well, Shaq's gonna get blown by, but you're gonna get better at it, right? And that's the whole point of last season. I called it VR missions for a reason, and I'm not coping now. Don't worry. It's not like, oh, I saw a 30-win season, and now I'm going back and creating excuses. I told you this in game 2. I told you this in game 2, game 3 last year. This is not a team that is using their team optimally. They're not using their players optimally, and that's by design. So here, this is what you traded for. This guy can do this. This guy is, they used to call him Manny Quick. This is one of the fastest players in the league. I remember asking a scout when the Raptors traded for Immanuel Quickley, he said he might have the best handle in the league. Now, obviously, not Kyrie Irving, but beyond that, it's a top 10 handle in the league, right? He's one of the fastest players in the league. How do you use that player? Quick hitters, man. Use that guy off the ball. This guy is a menace. And you could use him like that. And he's refined this floater stuff, but nah, we want him finishing right at the paint. We want him finishing right at the rim. We want him going all the way with these full layups. And he struggled early. He struggled early. But this is when you start winning, this right here, this shot with his release point, with his high arc, you're not touching this. Tony Parker literally became a Hall of Famer doing this one move over and over. And Immanuel Quickley has a lot of Tony Parker in his game, a lot. Now, what about using his teammates? Well, he's great at that too. And this is where I think he's really going to shine. Tariq saying, what's Quickley's wingspan? Is 6'8 and a half, 6'9. So it's enormous for a point guard who's 6'3. Here, now, here, he just beats Jared Allen off the dribble. In the first play, we saw that he backed him up and took the three. This time, just beats him off the dribble. Right? Now, here, off ball. This is how the Raptors plan to use all of their dominant screeners from Scottie to Jakob. You know what Scottie Barnes, Jakob Pertl, and Colin Murray-Boyles all have in common? They're all better screen setters than Giannis Antetokounmpo right now. I'm telling you. Screen setting is a skill, and the Raptors have some of the best screen setters in the league. Look at that screen. Great angle, gives them clear separation. Here, there's an opportunity to do one of two things. He can drop it to Yak, who will finish right at the rim or get fouled, or he can just do this. And this is his whole game. That's what he does, man. Once again, you get stuck on this screen. He doesn't need a lot of space, right? Now he's running with Yak. He can easily slip this to him with his left hand, but Zubac's there, right? So he gets the defender on his hip, takes that little bump, boom, finish. Now, how much easier is that move if you're a little bit stronger? It's a lot easier if you're stronger. Here, once again, using the Jakob Pertl screen, little handoff, boom. Defender gets lost. Yak takes him out. And again, this one, look at how he's able to freeze the defense here and then just shift, go the other way. Boom. And once again, go to the rim. Off the offensive rebound, again, quick decisions. Something that they've been working on with Immanuel Quickley. His decision making was kind of shaky in New York at times, and which is why teams didn't want to trust him. But again, this little floater that he's got going is dynamite. Can't stop it. Once again, here with Bruno Fernando. Grady coming up, defender, miscommunicates. Immanuel Quickley intelligently cuts behind. And Bruno Fernando is, after a moment of hesitation, willing to make that pass, and Immanuel Quickley goes right to the basket for that layup. Now, consider the other side, which is the passing. This is a little pass, little pocket pass here to Thaddeus Young. Nothing fancy, but effective. Here, once again, right? Little dribble manipulation. He and Jakob Pertl have so much positive synergy, but honestly, Jakob Pertl is a point guard's dream, right? Jakob Pertl and Davion Mitchell had incredible synergy, and Jakob Pertl and Immanuel Quickley certainly have a lot of positive synergy here. Now, take a look at this. What is the play here? Can definitely shift this over to Pascal Siakam in the corner, who made one of his very few threes that season. Right now, he's a lights out shooter. Now, this one's interesting because here you see that there's RJ Barrett in the corner, right? Not a great shooter by any means, but the Kings are going to respect him as a guy who can sort of shoot. Now, he sort of freezes the defense momentarily there. You notice, like, with the threat of RJ right there, and Scottie Barnes intelligently cuts beyond, noticing that there's really no rim protector back there with Domas Sabonis there. So it's interesting that he is able to manipulate the situation with two to the ball, and he's able to float this above. And that's a great pass. That's just a great pass. This one is interesting. It's nifty with Chris Boucher, who is always a great cutter, slips this through the defense, and boom. So the reality of the situation is Immanuel Quickley is a lot better, in my opinion, than people give him credit for. And I think that a lot of people, again, They hone in on $32 million. They hone in on the 30s, right? So it's the 36% win percentage with him. They were 12-21 without him last year. Sorry, with him last year. They hone in on 32.5, right? Which is the amount of money he's owed for the next 4 years on a flat contract. They hone in on all of these numbers, but they're not really paying attention to how much he's progressed as a playmaker. They're not really focusing on what he does for his teammates. If you take him off this team and replace him with De'Aaron Fox, you may think Fox is a better player. You may think Fox is a more dynamic player. And I myself have entertained in the past of maybe Immanuel Quickley for De'Aaron Fox makes sense. But as this team is currently constructed, Immanuel Quickley helps you more than De'Aaron Fox. Humble, hot take. I think he helps more. And I think when you talk about two-way impact from smallish point guards, it should not be taken for granted. Now, is Desmond Bane a better player? Yes. Is Devin Booker a better player? Yes. Is Malik Monk a better player? I don't think so, because Malik is so washed on defense. Offensively, maybe you can give Malik Monk a slight edge, but he's in the tier of upper rotation players. I think he is a borderline starter for most teams in the league. Now, this is a cup of water in a coffee glass. It's nothing to write home about. It's just water. You have water. I have water. We all have water. We're not starving. We're not in some third world country where water is hard to get. But for somebody in the desert right now, this right now is worth like $1 million. And I think that's what the Raptors sort of found themselves in, right? It's not really fair to say, okay, well, who else was giving Immanuel Quickley $32 million? Who else was giving Brandon Ingram $40 million? The answer is probably nobody. Probably nobody, right? That's probably the answer. Maybe Brandon Ingram could have gotten 34 million from somebody. Maybe Immanuel Quickley could have gotten 26 or 27 from San Antonio. But yo, that's the cost of doing business. You want to take care of your guys. You want to pay guys. You don't want them to be salty. You don't want them to feel like they got lowballed. You certainly don't want to take a chance where the guy you just traded for can literally walk. Now, obviously, with Immanuel Quickley, it was a little bit different because he was a restricted free agent. You probably could have rolled the dice. But I think rolling the dice would have yielded Immanuel Quickley like a $27 million offer from San Antonio. From what I understood before San Antonio traded for De'Aaron Fox, they were really interested in Immanuel Quickley. So maybe the Raptors saw the tea leaves and said, hey, we know this offer is coming. Maybe it'll be 30. Maybe it'll be 32. Let's just take the risk off the table. I think a lot of the $32 million is also being miscalculated because the flat contract helps. Not now, in the future, it helps. If he had gotten, let's just say he'd gotten those 8% raises on his deal, he'd be at like 27 million or 28 million to start, which I think would have been like a lot more acceptable for people. But the math doesn't care about your feelings. 32.5 feels high right now, but would 37 million in the final year of his deal make you feel any better? I don't think so. So the Raptors opted for a flat contract because Scottie's obviously going to get the max raises. And I think that that's probably the way to look at this contract is like, it's probably a distraction more than anything. It's probably a 10 to 15% overpay. But at the end of the day, you're a team that desperately needs ball handling, desperately needs spacing, desperately needs shooting. And at the moment that you traded for him, desperately needed talent. And Immanuel Quickley checks all those boxes. And again, those analytics are not lying to you. These analytics are fantastic. And watching him, obviously, I think a lot of people didn't watch him. I'm gonna be honest. I think a lot of Raptor fans have confessed to me, they weren't really tuned into the games this year. So you're just checking out the box score and you're like, all right, Immanuel Quickley, 21 points, 7 assists. But you're like, are you really honing in on 28 minutes, 29 minutes? You see how quickly he's doing it. You see how efficiently he's doing it. You see the spacing that he's working with. It's funny how we consistently make excuses for our favorite players, but then kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to players who maybe aren't our favorite players. And I don't think Immanuel Quickley is most people's favorite player. I see the discourse being, oh, it's BI, it's Scottie, it's RJ. But like this guy is not chopped liver. He is easily, in my opinion, and not by any close margin, your third best player. Like, I think he is easily your third best player. Like, and offensively, he might be your second best player. depending on the jump that Scottie makes. So I think maybe let's chill on the disrespect. The American media is going to disrespect this dude enough because, he's not a big household name. He wasn't a lottery pick, came off the bench in one of the largest media markets, and anchoring biases are real. Anchoring biases like rest in peace, Hulk Hogan. That's an anchoring bias. We could talk about that for a moment towards the end of this live. Talking about the Hulk Hogan, Terry Bollea passing away today at the age of 71. We'll definitely talk about that for a bit. But yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Stop disrespecting Immanuel Quickley, man. And I guess I got to take my own advice as well because I've certainly, had some things to say about him this season, throughout the season, consistently harping on the overpaid. But again, this is a guy who the anchoring bias is real, man. You introduced to him as a backup guard. You were introduced to him as $32 million. You were introduced to him as what you got for OG Anunoby. You were introduced to him as, a guy who just played, or at least you last remember him as a guy who missed almost 50 games this year. He missed 49 games this past year. So again, none of these things are going to make you feel better. And I think that we have a tendency as basketball fans to kind of count money. I'm not a pocket watcher myself, but I think a lot of people do that thing where it's like, we paid this guy $30 million and he played 33 games. You know what I mean? Like I think there's that sort of tendency to pocket watch. And there's a lot of work that's going on behind the scenes with IQ. Obviously, he was held out by team. They wanted him out. Like they wanted to hold him out to develop Jamal Shed, to develop RJ's, pick and roll stuff. They wanted to rest him. They didn't want to get him injured, whatever. But don't lose the forest from the trees. The grind does not stop when the lights turn on and off in Scotiabank. Like he worked all year. He's working this off season. And perhaps this is more of a sentimental thing with Immanuel Quickley, but chop wood, carry water, bro. Chop wood, carry water. One of the biggest reasons that I've always really had a strong, affinity for Immanuel Quickley is because I know that he works crazy hard. And I think that one of the things that the Raptors probably saw in him when they brought him into their facility and, had a half season audition with him before giving him that contract was this is a guy who is very positive for his teammates, insanely hard worker, and replicates some of what you lost when you lost Pascal and Fred, in terms of organizational stability and in terms of just an adult, who's probably too young to be like the adult voice in the room, but he has that sort of command. And I think it's hard to measure the intangibles. Like, how do you measure Garrett Temple's $3 million? Like, how do you measure that? Like, is he worth $3 million? Does he give you $3 million worth of points, rebounds, and assists? Probably not. But he has intangible qualities that help his teammates get better. I think he has, stabilizing qualities to help his teammates in practices. And I think Immanuel Quickley has a little bit of that too, because his skill set synergizes so well in theory with Scottie Barnes. So now this year, when he, Scottie, BI are more in roles that they are most accustomed to or most suited to, I think you'll see some of that stuff really pop out. Let's talk about Hulk Hogan passing away very quickly. I got to get out of here, but I wanted to do this video. Listen, I grew up a really big wrestling fan, really huge fan of WWF in the 90s. Became a really massive fan of the WCW. Hulk Hogan was a really big part of my childhood, unfortunately. And that moment, Bash at the Beach, when he joined the Outsiders, was probably one of the biggest, oh my God, moments in TV history. Probably. It had to be. It had to be up there, man. I don't know if you're a wrestling fan. Give me a W in the chat if you are, but holy shit, man. That was truly crazy. Is he the third man? Yo, I have recounted that moment many times. Anchoring bias. Say your prayers, take your vitamins. 26, 22-inch arms, the all-American, this, that, dream, great role model, right? If you're a kid who grew up in the 90s or 80s or even 70s with Hulk Hogan, this is a guy who gave you a lot of memories. If you're a rational adult who's been online and has seen some of the stuff over the last 10 years that's come out about him, this is a person who probably haunts your dreams. This is a racist, narcissistic abuser. This is a person who abused his family, abused his peers, abused his coworkers, abused his power, position, and frankly has abused his authority and fame and leveraged it in a very selfish way. for himself. They tell you not to talk ill of the dead, but I've always believed in not reinventing stories about the dead. I think two things can be true. I think you can miss Hulk Hogan, the wrestler. I think you can probably just, it's complicated, and people who are like Bill Cosby was one of my favorite comedians growing up. How do I reconcile that? How the fuck do I reconcile that? I loved R. Kelly and Michael Jackson as musicians. How am I supposed to think about that? How am I supposed to feel about that when Ignition comes on, or World's Greatest? Like, am I supposed to turn it off? That's always been sort of the conundrum in the back of my mind. And it doesn't stop with these wrestlers, right? When Terry Bollea, which is, Hulk Hogan, the sex tape thing came out, the N-word shit came out. I gotta say, I walked away from him so fast. Now, he was never one of my favorite wrestlers, to be honest. My favorite wrestlers were Sting, Bret Hart, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Undertaker, obviously Kevin Nash, Scott Hall. Like, these were my guys. Hogan was just in the background. He was like Bill Goldberg. He was like whoever. And, I can't deny that he was a really big part of my childhood. I just can't deny that. So that's tough. But, tough. And I hope that his death can serve as a reminder of what not to do, for these wrestlers and all that shit. Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of Shawn Michaels or Triple H or China or, D-Generation X in general. Although I'm sure grade 6 or grade 7 me told some people to suck it, but like I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan. At the time, I was very much into the outsiders. Eddie Guerrero for sure, Chris Benoit. There you go, Chris Benoit. Holy fuck, man. Chris Benoit. Like, how do you reconcile this? When somebody does something like this, like DJ Academics is currently talking about how Drake is about to leak all this shit about LeBron James. Oh my God. I grew up a Kobe fan in 97, 98. I would have told you he was one of my favorite players. I was like really, really into, this kid's rise from prep school to, prep star to the NBA, loved his confidence and all that shit. The scandal in 2003, 2004, like really shook me. It really did. Yeah, that was messed up. I definitely watched Karl Malone. And then, the shit that came out about him, I can barely say his name anymore. I got his today is his birthday, and I still say number 32. So look, it's weird. I understand today, we are in an age of virtue signaling where, if you just simply write rest in peace Hulk Hogan, you're suddenly defending every single thing he did. I don't think that's the case. And, if you want to celebrate the good parts, I think you're allowed to do that. I think you're allowed to do that, but just, don't wash over the bad parts too, because he did some really fucking awful things and really twisted shit. And it wasn't great. And he was a pretty disgusting person from what I gathered later on. So yeah. Eddie gotta be your favorite wrestler, Rob. Rest in peace, Eddie Guerrero, but he was not even close to one of my favorite wrestlers. I preferred Rey Mysterio if we're talking about, technical wrestlers, Bret Hart and all that stuff. Lakes Big said, good thing no station in their right mind plays on R. Kelly anymore. Yeah, exactly. I mean, our interpretation of people is very individualized, right? Our memories of people are individualized. I don't even, it's one thing for me to say, like, I have complicated feelings about Hulk Hogan and these controversial figures who've been embroiled in all of these or entangled in all of these dramas and controversies and scandals. I can't even imagine what the people close to them feel like. The people who grew up with them, the people who are friends with them, the people who will call them brother, sister, father, mother, like how do they reconcile with their father being a racist or, something like that. So that's really tough. You know what I mean? Dat Canadian said, what were your thoughts when the Montreal screw job happened? So I need to look for this, but it was, oh, man, it was like 95 or 94. And you know how Bret Hart comes down and he, like, in some of the house shows and shit, like he'll take his glasses off and he'll give it on a little kid. Yeah, I was one of those little kids, and I had a fucking Hitman. It got folded up and shit. They weren't like the highest quality. they were a lot less high quality than you would think they would be. I had one of those, man, and I gotta fucking find it. I know it's somewhere. It's in storage. I would never have thrown that out. It's one of my most cherished memories. I love Bret Hart, yo. I love Bret Hart. So when Vince McMahon did that to him, kind of dipshit move. And I loved Bret Hart before I moved to Canada. So that's the funny part. I loved Bret Hart before I moved to Canada. I thought he was super. I just I don't know, man. Bret Hart is like one of those dudes who just kind of stood for everything I wanted to stand for in life. He stood for family and integrity. And even if he was a little bit of a dick and, all that stuff, I genuinely felt bad for him. What about Chris Jericho? Not my vibe. Kurt Angle, Chris Jericho, not really my vibe. I have a whole bunch of wrestling action figures I am desperately trying to get rid of, like 15 of them. And I have no reason to want to keep them. Anyways, one of my friends is in town from California, so definitely going to be spending some time this weekend with him. Will not be making any content until probably Sunday. If you have Dak Canadian saying, also speaking of the Hart family, rest in peace, Owen Hart. Absolutely, rest in peace, Owen. That was tragic. I don't think I'll be making a video until Sunday. So if you have an idea of a topic you would like to see covered on this channel, please hit me up with that. There's also a channel that I discovered and that has been absolutely changing my mornings the last 3. And oh my God. Jake Fisher said that the Nets offered Cam Thomas $28 million for 2 years. That is wild with the amount of cap space the Nets have. So just because they have cap space, they need to offer him money to be an empty stat patter. The key is, no offense to Cam Thomas, that's probably an overpay. Make the argument that Cam Thomas is significantly better than Gary Trent Jr. Gary Trent Jr. just signed a minimum. That's what I try to tell people. Like, this RJ Barrett archetype is very replaceable. And Cam Thomas, in his defense, is not RJ Barrett, but also RJ Barrett in his defense is not Cam Thomas. These sort of empty calorie, score 20 points on a losing team guys, they're a dime a dozen. Jalen Green, dime a dozen. If Jalen Green was not extended by the Rockets and he had to hit the open market, he would get $20 million max. So $28 million might be a starting point for them. 2 years is the insulting part, though. The fact that they offer him 2 years shows you they really have no belief, and they're probably looking to move him the very next year as an expiring. Anyways, just let that be a reminder to you that low efficiency, empty calorie scoring on losing teams doesn't mean very much, especially when you can't defend. I think that's the other thing, right? When I look at this Raptors team, as much as I have a lot of faith in Jacoby, as much as I retain some amount of hope for Grady, getting stronger and all that stuff, I think when we look about all the perimeter players, there's no perimeter player who can do everything. There's no perimeter player who can guard, plus create their own shot, plus ball handle, plus pass, plus shoot, plus score. 3-level score. Immanuel Quickley is that. He may not be the best version of that. He's not Donovan Mitchell. He's not, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But he's the closest thing to that archetype you have on your team. He's the closest one. Miss me with the RJ Barrett bullshit. He's not that. He is not that. Okay. Immanuel Quickley is the closest thing to a two-way perimeter player who can pass, dribble, shoot from all 3 levels that you have. He's the most complete basketball player on this team. He's not the best basketball player on this team. No, by no means. Scottie Barnes is the best basketball player on this team. But he is the most well-rounded and most complete and most portable basketball player on this team. And I think that makes him very useful. Anyways, that's my parting thoughts for you. Let me know when this video goes live, if there's a video that you would like to see this channel make, and I will try to do my best to make it on Sunday. Peace, guys.